Hi, everybody. Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, thanks for everybody coming out this morning. Natalie and I are going to be discussing design thinking, and the session is going to be broken up into two parts. Natalie is going to lead a piece on a lot of the background in design thinking, why it's valuable, why it's so emergent today. And the second hour will be a bit more of an interactive, hands-on piece led by myself in talking about some of the design studio activities that we do at my company, ArcWeb Technologies. So why don't we introduce ourselves?
Hi, I'm Natalie Nixon. I'm principal at Figure 8 Thinking. I have also been a professor for the past 16 years. I'm the founding director of the Strategic Design MBA program at Philadelphia University.
And I am Len Damico. I am the head of design at ArcWeb Technologies, and we are a product design and development consultancy located right around the corner at Second and Market in Old City.
All right, so let's begin. I want to take us through a not very interactive, but an interactive overview of design thinking. I'm a design strategist. I have a background in anthropology and fashion, which amazingly comes into play in my work every single day. And I decided to call this overview, Simplify, Reframe, Innovate, the Case for Design Thinking. How many of you are familiar with design thinking? Awesome. How many of you think you apply it, try to use it, and your approach to strategy sometimes here and there? Okay, great. So there's a lot of great books and webinars and websites and open source material about design thinking. There's a lot of ways to get at it, but so this is my perspective on it, based on my practice and based on developing a pretty robust curriculum on it. So what the big case for design thinking has to do with the fact that we are trying to survive in pretty volatile environment. So I pulled this image from this cartoon. Who wants change? Everybody. But who wants to change? Totally different story. So a big part of the case for design thinking is that it helps us to adapt to this change. So a lot of what we are faced with in our companies and our organizations is really organizations that have to convert to sense-making organizations. And sense-making is actually an academic term that comes from the work of Carl Weick, anthropologist, sociologist, and it really has to do with meaning making. So after we have understood the functional problem that we're solving for our clients, that our products are solving, that our services are solving, we also have to understand, if you understand Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at the level of meaning making, why are we there and how does our work connect to people on that level? So in my view, there's three major things that we have to get to, and I think the interactive session that we've planned, you may want to refer to this or keep this in the back of your mind, but much more transparent platforms and transparency in terms of organizations, even in our governance today, the opportunity to curate offerings, and which means that now we have a co-creator type of role with our clients. And this is a term I made up because I think that we have got to, especially like if we look at highly regulated environments like higher education, healthcare, finance, how can we make our products and services more like life, right? So if I want to go to see a movie, I pull up my Fandango app. It's simple. It connects to my payment options. I can connect socially with other people to let them know what I'm up to. Why can't we structure the way you register for a class in higher education, for example, more like that? So how can we make experiences more seamless for the way customers are experiencing them in their everyday life to when they start to interact with our company? So another way of thinking about this is, how might we disrupt ourselves on an individual level and ourselves in terms of our organizations? So in my view, we've got to become much more adaptive, resilient, curious, emphasis on curiosity, open source problem solvers. And I think design thinking is one way to do that. So why design? Before we can talk about design thinking, let's talk about design, because design thinking is not all designers are design thinkers. Not all designers embrace design thinking. Design thinking stems from some of the approaches from design. So the main reason why design makes sense is because we have to survive in VUCA environments that are volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Does anyone know where this mnemonic first came from? It came from our military when we first entered Afghanistan. And so for obvious reasons, the terrain was volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, and then corporate America began to adopt the term. So the first reason why I think design is relevant is that designers are essentially change agents. Designers get to ask the question, what if? And I mentioned I have a background in fashion, so whether you are designing garments for protection against the elements or to evoke status or self-worth, whether you're an architect who's designing buildings and structures, a graphic designer, a UX designer, your job is to push against assumptions. First, to understand what our current assumptions are, and then to break through them. So that's a pretty powerful thing to be equipped with. The second reason why I think design matters and is relevant is that design is a method of inquiry. It's a method of inquiry that starts with a very human-centered, empathic stance and goes on from there. And I'll talk a little bit more about the empathy piece. So that's why design is relevant. So what is design thinking? The simple way I like to explain design thinking is that it is a human-centered problem-solving process. And actually, I might even take a step back before we get to problem solving. If you apply the Pareto rule, the 80-20 rule, in design thinking, we spend 80% of our time framing the problem. Did we even ask the right question before we go running down this rabbit hole of assumptions? So in simplest of terms, it's a problem-solving process. It's a problem-solving process that borrows from the way designers work in approach problem framing of the tangible objects, furniture design and garment design and building structures. So we transfer that process from the tangible to the intangible. So we're much more now interested in designing processes and services and experiences and even systems. So we start with empathy. We start with this human-centered problem-solving, human-centered stance. So when I started the strategic design MBA program, I was trying to creatively disrupt graduate business education. The traditional modality of business education is hyper-solutions oriented. And I've now taught engineering students, design students, business students, and business students are the absolute worst at receiving feedback. When business students begin to present an idea, and they begin to get feedback, if it's kind of in design studio lingo, if it's the kind of the crit phase, they get real defensive about, we've already thought about that. If you thought about that, it would have been reflected and represented. One of the beautiful things about design thinking is that when you start with this empathic stance, you reserve judgment, and there's this really cool feedback loop that's a very inside-out process, where you start with the person who is buying and engaging your service and products, and you assume that will drive profitability and efficiencies and productivity. In theory, design thinking looks something like this. It would be this nice, neat, linear, lockstep process, right? In reality, design thinking looks like that. It's very messy, it's very chaotic, as is life, but it helps us to have processes and frameworks to help us navigate that ambiguity and to navigate that messiness. Very few of us have work days that look like this. So why do we try to equip ourselves with these kind of faux processes for a process a work life that doesn't look like that? So Larry Keeley is the president founder of the Doblin Group. Doblin was recently acquired about a year or so ago by Deloitte. And he's said this really nice statement that design is the art and science of cutting cubes out of fog. And if you can get your head wrapped around that, then you're a lot further ahead of this than me. But I just like to kind of meditate on that statement. I think it's a really provocative statement. The gentleman on the left, his name is Herb Simon. He was a Nobel Peace Prize laureate. He's considered by some as the grandpapa of AI, of artificial intelligence. And Herb Simon said that we are all designers. So with that, I crown you all as designers. This is an image that I like to refer to a lot because, again, it speaks to the ambiguity that most of us are involved in when we were first given a client scope, a challenge. And what's really critical to notice here is that we don't distill to some clarity until we begin to prototype. And that's some of what Len is going to be taking us through in the second part of this. So we do a lot of divergent thinking, that blue sky, brainstorming, pie in the sky, what if thinking, and then we've got to start to converge. We do need to get practical, and we need to think about constraints such as budgets and regulatory environment and other external environments and staffing, et cetera. But I want to engage you guys in a very short exercise around diversion thinking. So, what do you see before you? Not a trick question. Paper clips, right? Or are they, right? Are they bent pieces of metal, bent pieces of plastic? So would you just take that blank piece of paper that I hand out? So you should have a blank piece of paper, and you should have a sheet with a bunch of circles. Take the blank sheet of paper. You need a pen. And here's what I'd like you to do when I say go. I would like you, here's the challenge. I would like you to think of as many ways as possible that one might use this bent piece of metal / plastic, this paper clip. You can think in different scale levels. You can think multiple millions of paper clips. You can think of one solo single paper clip. What's most important about this exercise is that you dive into this exercise with the mind of your 7-year-old self. If you dive into this exercise with your current mindset, this is going to be really, really hard. But if you dive into this thinking in really wacky, far out, so impractical types of ways, this is going to be a lot more fun, and you're going to yield much more interesting answers. So here's the challenge. In 90 seconds, don't start yet. I'd like you to list as many ways as possible that one could use a paperclip / paper clips. You have permission to be bold, fanciful, fantastical. Lewd, we'll keep it in this room, but really out there. Are there any clarifying questions?
Along the description, just
like a word, a phrase, yeah, just really, really quick. You're just jotting ideas down. Don't judge yourself. Just as something pops into your head, write it down. And that was a good clarifying question. Any other clarifying questions? Okay, so you have 90 seconds. Aim for, bless you, aim for 20 ways that you could use. 20, I know it's a lot. I'm making you stretch. 20 ways that you could possibly use paper clips, paperclip. Ready, set, go. "60 seconds. Keep going. Please do not be practical. Keep going. Aim for 20. First thing comes in your mind, plop it down. 45 seconds. Keep going. Good. 35 seconds. 20 seconds. Keep going. Your 6-year-old self. 10 seconds. Good. 4, 3, 2, 1. Awesome. Okay. Count up how many ideas you thought of. Put a circle next to that list. Write the number down and circle it. Sorry. And would everyone stand up, please? Stand up. So when I give workshops, I ask people to stand a lot because we often forget that our spinal cord is an extension of our brain. So it's really important to have brain synapses working in much more dynamic ways by standing regularly and often. So if you thought of at least 3 ways that one might use a paperclip, 3 ways, remain standing. Less than 3, please have a seat. Good. So at least 5 ways that you could use a paperclip, remain standing. Less than 5, have a seat. Okay. If you thought of at least 7 ways that one might use paper clips, remain standing. Less than 7, please have a seat. Okay. If you thought of at least 9 ways that one could use a paper clip, remain standing. Less than 9, please have a seat. Good. If you thought of at least 11 ways that one could use a paper clip, remain standing. Less than 11, have a seat. Awesome. If you thought of at least 13 ways that one could use a paper clip, remain standing. Less than 13, have a seat. If you thought at least 15 ways. Okay. So how many ways did you think of? 18. Bravo. 20. Awesome. Please stand. Would you tell us what are all your ideas?
Oh, I didn't write them down, unfortunately, because I didn't have a pen.
Oh, okay.
But I could try to go through them.
You want to try to go through them?
I might be able to go through.
Okay.
To attach a sign to a plant so you know what kind of plant it is. To tie fabric together, like to piece two pieces of fabric together to identify matching pairs of shoes. To make jewelry, necklace, earrings. To make tree decorations, like Christmas tree decorations, or to make a hanging curtain. I'm thinking about the colored ones that are up there. Gosh, what else?
Well, those are great. Someone else thought of 18. Who thought of 18? Would you add to that? Thank you so much. Thank you.
All kinds of times. I just put myself, like you said, in the video, it's maybe started maybe a younger kid, and had all kinds of toys, like making glasses, making cars.
Did you write it down?
People.
Want read your list, please?
So just generally, this thing for years, digging in the ground, making cars, making different animals, building some structures, building little cars, building up the right road. Throwing at people,
Weapons, hygiene tools.
close clips, pinching somebody, making my glasses, making little earmuffs, making food, like pretend food for your
Yes. Yes, and very good. Thank you both. So here's the thing. If you thought of at least a dozen ways to do this, you're awesome. And those are the folks you want on teams, right? This is called lateral thinking. It's the ability to connect the dots between seemingly disparate areas. The good news is that you can get really good at this. You can get much better at this. You can practice this. I have a pal named Baldur Onerheim who studies the neuroscience behind creativity. And he has a great TEDx talk about this. And one exercise you can do, for example, when you're brushing your teeth at night or in the morning, you can think of two seemingly irrelevant objects and then start to just let your mind whirl about all the ways you could connect them, like a banana and an airplane. Go and see what you think of. All right, so thank you for indulging me in that. Harvard Business Review decided to devote its September 2015 issue to design thinking. So those of us in the field were really excited about that because the field had been blessed by the iconic Harvard University, Harvard Business Review. But one of the things that I thought was super interesting about that issue is that one of the articles pointed out that the mainstream management consultancies, like McKinsey, like Deloitte, Accenture, have all started to acquire design strategy firms. Now, do they know what to do with them? Not exactly yet. They're still a bit siloed. However, the point is they realize they need more than a SWOT analysis to get to the innovative insight. So that was pretty reassuring. Here's what's really happening, though, in mainstream business environments. They realize they need to start asking different questions. They need some help on how do you frame a better question. So new questions to answer include things like how do you move just beyond delivering a service to delivering meaning? That's the sense-making piece. What does ownership actually mean? And this question in the orange, what does movement mean to people today? So mobility matters not only to SEPTA and to Virgin/Alaska Airlines, mobility also matters to retailers. It also matters to finance and banking. Because if your end user is 20-year-old, they might be defining mobility as much 70% virtual and 30% physical, which completely changes the way you market and advertise. It completely changes your supply chain structure. It completely changes who you hire, right, and how you onboard them. So we start with these 30,000-foot level questions and then drill them down. So the shifts in thinking have been away from what is the solution, a solutions orientation, to what's the problem that we're really trying to solve. But that's a little negative in stance. So really what we want to be asking is, what's the opportunity? And I want to take you through 3 real quick cases, just anecdotes of industries that are starting to reframe questions. So let's start with finance. So we have these stalwart legacy laden institutions like Fidelity Bank, which, by the way, Fidelity actually has a vice president of design thinking, so bravo to them. Vanguard, right in our region, and Capital One, right? And I blog for Inc.com, and I did a blog on these fintechs that are so disruptive to these stalwart financial institutions. So fintechs like SoFi and Google Wallet and Square and Stash and Venmo. And I relayed a conversation I had with a 24-year-old friend who's out in San Francisco now, who, we had dinner last summer when I was out there, and she was explaining that she and her apartment mates pay rent through Venmo. And she was showing me, she had like 6 different apps on her phone, all related to the way she's managing her money. One tells her net worth. When I was 23, I didn't even know what net worth was. And then she said, and then I use my Wells Fargo app. Maybe I look at that once a month. These other apps she's looking at daily, at the least weekly. And what they use is humor and community, which is a direct result of really understanding the human need and triggers and motivations behind their end users. Second sector that's really interesting to look at is pharma. So in 2015, when all the patents, I'm about to say retired, were expiring on a lot of big pharma, that's actually, to their credit, up to 2015, big pharma was realizing, hang on, our end user is not actually the physician, our end user is us, the patient. So you started seeing this reflected in the way commercials are now designed. So they realize they need to make this shift, because if I get a strange rash on my hand, I can circumvent my doctor, not recommended, but I can circumvent my doctor. I can Google image it. I can Google doctor it. And I think I know what's wrong. I can walk into a Walmart or a Target and buy a white label product. And so how does Merck, or how does any of the other big pharma, how do they become top of mind for me, right? So this is a real challenge. And the third example I'll give is from hospitality. So the W Hotel is one of the first hotels to create an entirely new job category of global fashion director, because they realize there's a lot that they have to learn from the way the fashion business works. Fashion is excellent at anticipating needs. No one in the United States of America needs another t-shirt or another pair of jeans. Yet this is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And they wisely said, what if we incorporated that mindset and that skill set to our C-suite? They realized that they need to merchandise their hotels, and they need that help all the way to the way their staff is attired. So another exercise. So I said in the very beginning that a lot of design thinking is about reframing the problem. Are you even asking the right question? And the way we know this is that we have to, in order to do this, we have to get out the 4 walls of our boardrooms, of our meeting rooms, and we have to get on the ground and interact with the people, the human beings who are buying our services and products. So what problem are we solving? Let's do a quick exercise. So this is a framework that I love, 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 and it's about the functional, social, and emotional job that you are solving in your work. So this is just something I want you to just do really quietly to yourselves, and then share with the person in your row that you're seated next to. So I think most of us are quite clear on the functional problem we're solving in our work, right? But are you clear on the social problem you're solving for your customer and the emotional problem you're solving? Because if you think about it, any brand, product, experience, or service that you love, I guarantee they are solving a problem for you, not only on the functional level. Does it operate? Does it function? Does it not break down, right? But they're solving a problem for you on the social and emotional level. So I'll model this example. As I've been a professor for 16 years. The problem I'm solving on a functional level is I want to make sure I educate students so they can equip themselves to have upward mobility, advance, and have intellectual enlightenment. And how do I do that? I teach, I develop curriculum, I research, I serve in committees. The social problem I'm solving is to build an intellectual community of like-minded design strategy researchers around the world, and to cultivate that type of community for my students. That's the social problem I'm solving. The emotional problem I'm solving, which is really why I've shown up for work all this time, is I'm trying to change lives through ideas. That's really, that's the driver. That's really feeds into all these other realms. So would you take 60 seconds, and I will time you, and just jot down this Venn diagram and plop down one idea for each of these. All right? Please begin. Don't overthink it, just one idea per realm. What's the functional, social, and emotional problem you think you're solving in your department, your company, your sector? You choose. All right, would you just turn to your neighbor, if you're a threesome, just share really quickly, especially maybe focus on the emotional and social piece. Please share, you have 1 minute. To be continued at lunch or break. Point to someone who's still talking. All right, so just to get you thinking, please feel free to continue this conversation over lunch. But it often is a really cool paradigm shift to think about on these levels, again, on the sense-making levels, what are the problems that our products and services and experiences are solving? So I'm going to run through 4 basic principles that I like to highlight about design thinking, and I'll give you quick examples for each, and then one more exercise, and then you're really going to be doing a lot more sense after we've kind of primed your thinking. So the 4 principles that I like to highlight about design thinking are as follows: empathy, lateral thinking, prototyping, and story. So let's start with empathy. Empathy is about the opportunity to have human conversations with our peers, our colleagues, and with our customers. To be able to look into the eyes of people who are buying our stuff and really understanding what is motivating them requires a different method of inquiry. Big data is cool. Big data shows us patterns. Big data does not necessarily tell us why. Right? So to have much more integrative approaches, empathy means that we can now integrate much more qualitative research methods in addition to the quant. So we've got to get out of the 4 walls of our boardrooms and our office buildings, and we've got to get onto the ground, immersed in the lives and the work of the people who we want to connect with through our products and services. The second principle in design thinking is lateral thinking. So we did a bit of that with the paperclip exercise. It's this ability to connect the dots between disparate areas. Why does that matter? Because if you keep baselining and benchmarking within your industry, you really are not innovating or thinking out of the box. So just as the W said, yeah, we're hospitality, but how does fashion look at this, right? What would fill in the blank do, right? So a great example of this is there's an article, this is now about 4 years old, but there's a physician named Atul Gawande. He writes for the New Yorker magazine. And he wrote a wonderful essay about what hospitals can learn from the Cheesecake Factory restaurant. His point was that every night at the Cheesecake Factory restaurant, the back of the house looks crazy to the novice. Right? I earned money to get through college working in restaurants and catering, and it feels a little nutso if you don't understand the systems that are in place. His point was that every single night, Cheesecake Factory offers consistent service and product. You know what you're going to get when you walk into a Cheesecake Factory restaurant. Alternatively, if you've ever had to spend any bit of time in the emergency room, it doesn't feel like the left hand knows what the right hand is doing. His point was that maybe, just maybe, there's something that healthcare and physicians can learn from hospitality and the restaurant business. So that's an example. And actually now the healthcare industry is looking a lot to hospitality and such to understand the way they can be much more human-centered in their approaches. So that was lateral thinking. Prototyping is the third principle that I like to highlight about design thinking. Prototypes are rough draft, ugly mock-ups. There's a whole lot of versions of prototypes. The rougher the better, so doodles are awesome. Sketches are great. 3D digital printing can be a type of prototype, but it's really, in my view, a little too finesse, and that should be like a high fidelity down the line prototype when you've really started to get input, because the prettier the prototype, the less likely people are to critique it and to lean in and ask questions that you haven't thought of. So financial services is doing a lot more prototyping through pop-up shops, right? So having a temporary installment that could be testing out everything from the way people line up in a queue and how the new cash register system is working to a new type of product or service that you're trying to sell. Higher ed, some higher ed is starting to experiment with, has been experimenting with this. So Stanford, for example, has been doing pop-up classes. Who says a course has to be 16 weeks long? Who says that a class has to meet 2 or 3 days a week between basically 8 in the morning and 7 o'clock at night? And you can start to test different subject matter areas that students may be interested in and test different modalities of learning. The fourth principle is story. Stories are human truth-telling, and stories are data. Stories are data. And one of the best fonts of this data are people at the front line. The people who are interacting with the customer every single day at the cash register are really important sources. It's no coincidence that some of the most innovative companies today have short films that have gone viral on YouTube. I'm thinking of Chipotle. Their first animated short, despite all the trouble they've had the past couple years, but their first animated short was an amazing animation that had nothing to do about burritos. It was all about the big industrial food complex, right? And there was a Coldplay song that Willie Nelson was singing. This short film went so viral and got so much reception that the Cannes Film Festival designed an entirely new award category for that. I'm thinking of Dove's Real Beauty sketches. I'm going to show you a short clip in a moment. And Taiwan Bank has these series that are just tearjerkers because they understand the social and emotional problem that they're solving for the customer. So have a look at this one.
So do you like your hair?
No.
You don't like your hair?
I want my hair to be straight because when you have your hair straight, it's really smooth.
Do you think that's more beautiful?
Yeah. Doesn't really feel good to have curly hair. I try to make it straight, but it doesn't work. I try to do this, but it doesn't work.
Sometimes I just wish I could just rip it out, but I'm not gonna do that.
I think about my hair that I don't want it anymore.
That feeling makes me sad sometimes when I leave out my hair.
Hey now, honey, you know you're amazing every day. Let your hair loose and play. Don't hide your curls away. This way.
One, two, three, four.
We all know our girls. We all know our hair. We all know our girls. We all know our hair. We all know our girls. We all know our hair. We all know our girls. We all know our hair. I love it, love it. Oh, I love it, love it. Oh, I love it, love it. I love it, love it. Perfect this way.
Okay, so leading with story, the only way they get those insights is by talking to people. Followed up with some minor stats. Never once do you see a bottle of shampoo or hair conditioner or a bar of soap because they are addressing other motivations about what matters to their customers with the hopeful goal that Dove will be first of mind when they're standing in the drugstore line or the supermarket. So let's end with a quick exercise about reframing the question. So let's say you are Toys R Us, right? Should this be the question you ask? Should your question you should be asking this, the burning question to grow your business, should it be, how do we get parents to buy more toys and get more market share? Is that the question you should be asking? Or should the question be this, how do kids play? Because if you're asking this question, it's a very different method of inquiry that could actually open up an entirely new vertical, an entirely new product category. If you're Gillette, and I don't know about you, but every time I'm in the supermarket line and I look at the glossy tabloids, some hotshot Hollywood actor has a little 5 o'clock shadow, I'd be a little nervous if I was Gillette, right? So the question they should be asking is, how do we sell more shavers or blades? Or is it, when men shave today, why are they shaving? And how do we connect to them on their terms? And then at some point, my graduate students did a project for a company here in Philly called lamps.com. And is the question that a company like lamps.com should be asking, is it, we've got to increase our market share in lamps? Or is it this question? What is illumination? Because if you're asking what is illumination, that takes you to an entirely new discovery area and opportunity. So I want you guys to do an exercise where you're thinking through this, and I'm going to explain how I want you to do this. This is adapted from 2 colleagues of mine who developed a framework to reframe questions, from Ellen DeResta and Heather McGowan. They said, let's say we're trying to innovate a toaster oven. You could ask, on the level of optimization, how do we make a cheaper toaster more quickly? Okay? How do we pump out more widgets? That's okay. That really won't move the needle in terms of innovation. Maybe you want to frame this question. How do we make a better toaster? That's a little bit more interesting. Maybe the question is, what are all the ways one could toast bread? When I was growing up, we didn't have a toaster. We used to toast bread in the oven. You just put it on broil and you get some toasted bread, right? Who says that you need a toaster to toast bread, right? So that's a technology question. Notice that the lines are getting squigglier. And finally, if we're trying to get to a new value proposition, is there a better way to achieve these attributes? So think about the attributes. Let's extrapolate the attributes of eating toast. Is it the crunch? Is it the feeling of restfulness? Is it nostalgia? Is it speed and it's quicker than making a full score breakfast, right? But what are those attributes, and is there a better way to achieve those attributes? So I'm going to guide you through reframing the question in your own business, but here's how I want you to do it. I don't want you to write words. I would like you to reflect your ideas in a different way. So everyone, go back to that piece of paper, that blank sheet. And with everyone on that blank sheet of paper, would you draw a dot? A dot. Nice. Would you draw a line? Great. Would you draw a circle? Would you draw a square? How about a stick figure? A stick figure smiling. Would you draw a stick figure person who looks confused? A wriggly line, squiggly line for their mouth. Great. Would you draw a house, a rectangle and a triangle? How about a straight line arrow? And then a squiggly line arrow. Would you draw a Venn diagram, 3 intersecting circles? Okay, guys, guess what? Sorry. Guess what? You can draw, right? So if you can doodle, you can draw. And I had the opportunity to take a workshop this last summer with Dan Rome, who's the author of Back of the Napkin, blah, 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 when words aren't enough. And my biggest takeaway from this phenomenal 2-day workshop was that the ability to visualize your ideas has less to do with your ability to draw and everything to do with your capacity for complex abstract thinking. Because if you really understand something, you can distill it down to its components and you can visualize it. You can abstract it with symbols, stick figures, etc. So here's how I want you to approach this reframing the question for your business. So think about, first decide on the business you're going to focus on. This is going to take 2 minutes. I want you to think through the 4 ways you could optimize your business. How could you improve it, add more bells and whistles? How could you think of different ways to deliver the current state? And then how else could you achieve those attributes? I'm going to challenge you to maybe focus on the top 2. Maybe you start with optimization and go right to value proposition, or optimization and technology. But the way I want you to represent these shifts in framing the challenge, framing the problem in your business, I want you to doodle your ideas. So come up with at least 2 doodles. One would be current state. How could you just optimize it, get more widgets out? And then really reach and stretch. How could you get to a new value proposition, or figure out different ways to achieve the current state. Are there any clarifying questions about what I'm asking you to do? So you're going to doodle, no words. Well, maybe a word or two is a phrase, but no sentences. Okay? I'm going to give you a minute to do this. So just don't overthink it, just a doodle, and then just share. Please begin. 1 minute just to doodle your ideas. Don't overthink it, it's just a doodle. Chicken scratch. Five seconds. All right, please share. 1 minute to share. Show each other your doodles. 1 minute. Okay, thank you. All right, guys. So, any observations on what the experience was like to share, talk through your ideas with a doodle versus earlier when you were talking through social, emotional, functional with with words? Yes?
I was having trouble trying to get the concepts into doodle.
Well, doodles
What I
are
wanted to say and what kind of shape, and I think I was focusing more on.
okay. Yeah. So, and don't worry about that part as much. Yes.
So I was also having a real hard time with that. Immediately, it's easier for me to kind of communicate with words, but for me, doodles evolve.
Yes.
So trying to get a doodle in a really quick time is very challenging for me.
Okay.
I know as I talk through things, I'm usually doodling on the board.
Okay.
Right? And then but it evolves.
All right. Cool. Well, I try to doodle a little bit every day. I find that the more I doodle it, the more I do it, the easier it gets. But it's definitely, it's a different function of your brain. It's a different way to express ideas. But it definitely also, I find that it encourages more questions when you have something that's a bit more unclear. But thank you for doing that, for engaging in that. So I started with saying that the whole point of this was to help you think about how could you curate things, make things more transparent, make them more like life. I edited a book called Strategic Design Thinking, and I'd love to gift it to the person in this room who can recall what are the 4 things that I like to highlight about design thinking. Oh, yeah.
Empathy, lateral, prototype and storage.
Lateral what?
Lateral technique, prototype and storage.
Awesome. You get a copy of the book. Thank you. Thanks, guys. And Len, you want to hook up your computer?
Let's do it.